before you watch what happened to this quiet schoolgirl. Remember this. In every town, there's one family you never want to mess with. So if you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear is based on real events, real consequences, and a real father whose name made entire cities go silent. Nobody at Ironwood High remembered the first time they saw Elena Carver. She slipped through the hallways like a breeze. Quiet, unnoticed, unimportant to most, and a perfect target to the cruel ones who needed someone smaller than themselves. She carried no phone, wore no jewelry, spoke to no one. Her long brown hair was always tied back in the same neat braid. Her clothes, simple, plain, almost outdated. Teachers called her polite. Students called her boring. Bullies called her prey. And not a single person in that school knew the last name she carried belonged to a man who controlled the entire city from the shadows. A man whose name parents whispered when they locked their doors at night. But on that Monday morning, Elena's life and theirs would split into a before and after. It began in the cafeteria, where the smell of cheap pizza and disinfectant blended into that strange fog only schools seemed to produce. Blake Turner, the golden-haired golden boy tormentor who believed the school was his kingdom to rule, sat with his pack Jackson, Troy, and Summer, the girl who recorded every humiliation they created. Blake didn't bother whispering when he spotted Elena walking past, eyes down, tray shaking slightly in her hands. "A rule breaker," he called out, using the nickname he invented after claiming she walked weird, which somehow in his logic meant she broke rules. "Come here now." Elena didn't. She never did. She simply kept walking, as if she didn't hear, as if refusing to acknowledge cruelty made her invisible. But Blake hated being ignored. Rage was oxygen to him. Humiliation was gasoline. He stood up, shoved his chair back so hard it clattered across the floor, and grabbed Elena's wrist before she could react. Her tray crashed to the floor, the sound echoing in the lunchroom. Every head turned. "Look at that," Blake mocked, tightening his grip as the camera on Summer's phone started recording. "Breaking school rules, again walking away from your superiors. Didn't anyone teach you respect?" Elena whispered, "Please let go." But Blake never let go. That wasn't what bullies like him did. Instead, he dragged her toward a table as students stepped aside, not wanting to be caught between him and whatever he decided to do next. Jackson laughed. Troy slapped Blake's back as if this were the entertainment portion of the school day. Summer angled her phone to get Elena's terrified face in frame. When Elena tried to pull free, Blake pushed her to her knees, forcing her hands behind her back. "Tie her," he ordered Troy, who eagerly reached for the roll of duct tape they kept in their backpacks, like it was a trophy of every bad thing they'd done. Duct tape, ropes, a pocket knife. The kind of objects adults thought teenagers couldn't possibly use cruelly because they didn't want to imagine such darkness in their own children. But darkness lived openly in Ironwood. Hyatt just wore Letterman jackets. Elena's voice cracked. "Please stop." "I didn't do anything." Blake leaned down, his breath almost touching her ear. "Everyone does something. You just hide yours. Let's see. What's under your silence, rule breaker?" The cafeteria didn't move, didn't breathe. No one stepped forward. No one dared. Because Blake's father sat on the town council and made sure consequences never touched his golden boy. The principal, terrified of political backlash, always looked away. Teachers pretended they didn't hear rumors. Parents convinced themselves kids were exaggerating. And in the center of it all, Elena, the quiet girl whose past none of them cared to know, was taped at her wrists and ankles in front of the entire school. Troy laughed as she struggled. "Look at her shake, like a scared puppy." Summer zoomed in with her camera. "This is going straight on my channel. I bet it hits 1 million views." Blake grabbed Elena's chin, forcing her to look up. "You want to know what happens to girls who think they can break my rules? They learn who runs this place." And with a sudden, brutal shove, he knocked her onto her back, the breath crashing out of her lungs. She coughed, choking on air, helpless. The cafeteria gasped, but Blake only smirked wider. Then Alina did something none of them expected. Not fighting, not crying. She whispered 2 words. You shouldn't end up. Blake froze. Shouldn't what? Alina swallowed hard, tears trembling in her eyes. You shouldn't do this. Not to me. Troy laughed. Or what? You'll tell your daddy. He mocked the word, like it tasted rotten. Oh wait, does she even have one? Maybe that's why she's such a freak. Alina didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because, the moment Troy said it, something flickered in her expression. Not fear, not pain, but a quiet warning. The kind of warning that only makes sense too late. Blake didn't see it, didn't notice. The way 2 freshmen slipped out of the cafeteria, after witnessing everything, didn't hear the whispers, spreading like wildfire through the hallways, because they knew they had seen. Alina, before outside school, surrounded by black SUVs, escorted by silent men. They had heard rumors that she came from the Carver family, that her father wasn't just powerful, he was the ghost king of the city, the man whose decisions made judges tremble, whose soldiers moved unseen, whose vengeance was whispered about for decades. But Blake didn't know any of this. Blake didn't believe anything existed beyond his own cruelty. And so, when he whispered, "You can't stop me," Alina finally looked directly into his eyes. "My father can." Blake laughed so loudly, the cafeteria walls vibrated. "Your father?" he mocked. "What is he? A janitor? A gardener? A nobody? Like yo." He didn't finish. Because at that exact moment, every phone in the cafeteria buzzed. Every student read the same message. A warning from the school's own security group chat. Carver family vehicles spotted entering school grounds. Lockdown protocols recommended. Jackson's face drained of color. Troy's hands shook. Summer lowered her phone. Blake scoffed. "Carver, like the Mafia guy. Please, that's just some urban legend." But Alina didn't blink. "Your father should have taught you," she whispered softly, "not to touch people who don't belong to you." Before Blake could speak, the doors at the far end of the cafeteria slammed open, so violently the hinges cracked, and in walked 5 men, dressed in black suits, earpieces, glinting eyes, scanning the room like trained predators. Students dropped their food. Teachers froze. Summer's phone slipped from her hand, and behind them stepped a man whose name alone made criminals flee cities overnight. Dominic Carver, Lena's father, the city's unseen Mafia king, and the last person any bully should ever cross. The cafeteria went silent deadly. Suffocating silent as Dominic's cold eyes fixed on his daughter, bound on the floor, who touched her. His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that preceded storms. Blake stepped backward instinctively. His body knew fear, long before his mind accepted it. No one answered. No one needed to. Dominic's men already analyzed every detail, the ropes, the tape, the fingerprints on Elena's arms, the group standing closest. Dominic took one single step forward, and Blake Turner's world ended. The cafeteria seemed to shrink, as Dominic Carver's silence filled it like smoke. Blake tried to breathe, but his lungs locked, body stiffening with a terror he had never felt before. He had fought boys, mocked girls, humiliated half the school, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the feeling of being prey. Dominic didn't yell, didn't hurry. He walked with the slow, sure steps of a man who never needed to raise his voice to command fear. His men had already surrounded the bullies. Students pressed themselves against the walls, whispering prayers, clutching their phones with shaking hands. Summer's camera lay forgotten on the floor. Troy looked like he might faint. Jackson clutched the edge of a table so hard his knuckles turned white. Dominic kneeled beside Alina, his hands gentle as he cut the tape binding her wrists and ankles. "Felina," he whispered, brushing hair from her face. "Who did this to you?" Felina looked down. "Them," she said softly. Blake felt the world tilt as Dominic stood tall again, turning slowly toward him, expression unreadable. "You," Dominic said, voice quiet, almost polite. "What is your name?" Blake's throat dried. "B. Blake Turner." Dominic repeated it like a judge reading a sentence. "Blake Turner." Jackson tried to speak. "Sir," It was just a prank. One of Dominic's men pressed a hand to Jackson's shoulder, silencing him instantly. Blake stuttered. "We didn't know she was your daughter." Dominic stepped closer until Blake could see his reflection in the man's cold, dark eyes. "That is exactly why you should not have touched her." He turned to his men. "Get the principal." Students gasped as 2 guards disappeared out the back door, returning moments later, dragging Principal Hargreaves by the arm. His face pale. Dominic fixed him with a stare. "My daughter was assaulted on your campus, bound, humiliated, and you allowed it." The principal stumbled. "Mr. Carver, please, your influence mean we can resolve this." Dominic smiled slightly. He gestured, and his men stepped forward, placing a thick envelope in the principal's trembling hands. "Your resignation papers, effective immediately." The principal's jaw dropped. "You can't. You signed them the moment you allowed this." Dominic turned away. "Get out." The principal fled, nearly tripping over tables. Blake's knees buckled. "Please, sir, we're sorry." Dominic studied him. "I believe you are.